Hey there folks and friends, Connecting Dots here. It's Sunday, February the 9th, 2014, Fukushima Day 1066. I'm not sure if you saw my video yesterday on 1065, but I was talking about how TEPCO had now come forward and said that the levels of strontium in the groundwater samples taken back in July were actually 5 times higher. They originally came out saying that there was, as you can see down below here, 900,000 becquerels per liter, and now they've come forward saying that there was a record high of actually 5 million becquerels per liter, and that's only from one of the reactors here, reactor number 1. Now what's interesting here, it goes on to say how strontium usually accounts for about half of all the beta emitting substances in contaminated water at disaster-stricken power stations. So you know, if they're picking up here, it was 10 million in all, they figure that there was relatively 5 million becquerels of strontium out of that. Now, a little further on in this story, it goes on to say here how okay, for one thing, okay, strontium tends to accumulate in the bones. If you're wondering what kind of cancer it causes, and leukemia, obviously. Now, what's interesting is that this sample here that they're talking about specifically was taken in a 16-meter deep well located between reactors 1 and 2, roughly 25 meters from the Pacific Ocean, and it's also 6 meters away from an underground channel from which highly radioactive water was found to be seeping in the sea shortly after the crisis began. So it's not even directly in the channel, it's 6 meters away in between the two reactors, and that's how much radiation's right there. So you can imagine, I don't know why they're digging wells. I think they should try and stick it directly in the channel here and see how much is coming out directly in the channel. That'd be interesting. Now what's interesting also about this, it says that the utility has also said that it will have to reanalyze. Can you imagine that? Past samples. Because what? Some of the figures can't be trusted. Obviously not. Anyhow, I'm going to get on with this video here because this is all about this cesium. And not only is strontium something dangerous, but now it's coming out a little bit more mainstream here, especially on my island, Vancouver Island. So if you're Canadian, you might want to pay special attention to this one. Okay, so a story here on Energy News, February the 9th. Cesium release to continue for the next 5 decades, at least 50 years. That's something that I've been saying from the very beginning. We're just getting the very tip of the iceberg of what's actually going to take place. So this clip here comes from a NHK documentary that was released February 1st, 2014. And if you go down a little further on, and by the way, they're talking about reactor 1 here, how they've sent in a robot camera, and they've now found out that there's a crack here in one of these containment sorry, it's a condensation pipe, and what it does is it accumulates condensation between the vessel and the concrete shield. So there's not even supposed to be water flowing out of there at the quantity that's coming out there, so that's a major concern there. But if you go a little further on here, he goes on to say that given the amount released to date, tritium will be emitted for 20 years at least. Cesium will continue for even longer, another 40 to 50 years. And it goes on to say, crisis managers are still in the dark about the situation at reactors 2 and 3. It seems the road ahead will be tough. Heck, I'd say it's going to be a lot more than tough, folks, here. Now, I don't watch much TV. I'm not sure if you do, but this aired recently on September 13, 2013, and it was Bill Maher. I know the gentleman himself. I've watched him in the past, back in the day when I did watch TV. Now, they're referring here to a map that was issued back in 2013. And if you go on, I won't read the entire thing, but Maher says here, I go to Hawaii every year for New Year's Eve, and I swim in the ocean. People tell me I should not swim in the ocean in Hawaii. And Dr. Edwin Lehman says, senior scientist with the Union of Concerned Scientists, doctorate in physics from Cornell University, and a postdoctoral research associate at Princeton University, he says, Hawaii's not even on a direct path. So this year's okay. In 2015, I'd be worried about it. You know, and Maher turns around and says, I don't think so. So you're kind of scaring the shit out of me. I guess so, folks. I can't believe why this is not on mainstream news now. I'm going to get into this map here. It all came about in late August 2012, 13, sorry, where an Australian team had released their findings of where they believe the radiation would be headed here, and it was very clear that it had a prolonged exposure for the California coast lasting 10 years. I posted a video on this, and it's actually much more than 10 years, but their study, which was based on the initial release that came out of Fukushima, they're showing 10 years. Now, I want to get into that map because I think it's kind of interesting. Okay, so I've drawn in the border here between Canada-US. I've added the Canada-US writing. I also added the writing below where it says Pacific Ocean Cesium 137 concentration. It was actually from 0 to 200 meters deep. And this was the forecast to arrive here in April 2014. Now, you may notice the dotted line down the center is because the article itself, the Australian team, referred to as a radiation making a beeline for the west coast. And if you look above here, sure enough, where's it coming? And this is a great concern I had mentioned before here. I live right on the border here on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, Canada. I was aware this would be a major concern, not only atmospheric but oceanic dispersion. And sure enough here, the models are coming to show that this is a big concern. This is the Australian team, their findings. A year prior, the German team had come out with the exact same findings here, where there's going to be high levels of radiation, or the west coast will actually eventually have higher levels of radiation than those off the coast of Fukushima, directly because of the underwater currents. So what's going on? Not much in my town. No one's really caring about this. I mean, there's enough proof out there that cesium is obviously something we should worry about. I mentioned before, when you have cesium, you have hundreds of other hundreds of other highly radioactive particles, and some of them are hard to detect. Now, just on cesium alone here, it says the large quantities of cesium produced during fission events pose a persistent hazard. Its half-life of about 30 years is long enough that objects and regions contaminated by cesium remain dangerous to humans for a generation or more, but it is short enough to ensure that even relatively small quantities of cesium-137 release dangerous doses of radiation. We have an ongoing release here, folks, and not only do the initial release show that it was coming to the west coast, but we have an ongoing meltdown with more oceanic dispersion, oceanic contamination taking place, and nothing's taking place here. Canada, US, they've got their guard down. Some of you may recall that even back on March 21st, 2011, it was reported that Hawaii was hit with 50 times more uranium-238 than any other time here, all the way back in 2010. And should we be concerned about uranium? I'd figure so. I mean, look at uranium-238, a half-life of 4.47 billion years. You go down a little further here for the health effects, and what does it say? Intakes uranium exceeding EPA standards can lead to increased cancer risk, liver damage, or both. Long-term chronic intakes of uranium isotopes in food, water, or in air can lead to internal irradiation or chemical toxicity. No, it's not a map of the fallout, but I've often said that I wish the radiation being released wasn't invisible, and I wish it was more like a volcanic ash so everyone could see it. Because if they would see it, they'd be a little bit more aware and be concerned about it. But unfortunately, radiation is invisible. Now, this is a map here of the fallout from the Mount St. Helens volcano eruption back in the 1980s. And unfortunately, it blacks out to Canada, but a lot of it fell in Canada. I'm sure if anyone's Canadian, lives anywhere west here from Alberta on, may recall of this incident. So instead, what we have, just white invisible steam coming out. But if it was dark and people saw it coming down everywhere, and they get up in the morning and they go check their vehicles, and guaranteed everyone would be on top of this. But it's because it's invisible, nobody sees radiation. I mean, how do you protect yourself? But like I said, if it was on the car, on the windshield, I mean, we even have a map here that was published by the French government that showed that the maximum radiation during the Fukushima meltdown was, guess where? Hawaii. That's right. Not to say that anyone else on the west coast didn't get it, but that's where the highest level was in Hawaii. Higher than even over in Japan. That's right. Okay, so if you haven't seen the map yet, I'll show you. I'll also leave a link down below here in the Show More tab. Everything that I've shown in this video, it's all linked down below, as well as the this map. If you haven't seen it yet, quite interesting. Now keep in mind, now this is just one radioactive isotope, Cesium-137, and it was only tracked here between the March 12th to the 24th. And there's, like I've mentioned before in past videos, when you pick up cesium, you know that there's hundreds of other radioactive particles. If you haven't seen that video yet, it's called Fukushima Day 1040, I believe. It's the one with Dr. Gordon Edwards. He's a Canadian top nuclear expert here. He even worked on the Nuclear Safety Commission for a number of years. Anyways, long story short, this is only one radioactive isotope, and like I said, it's only from the 12th to the 24th. It's been ongoing here. It doesn't take into account the 400 tons of oceanic contamination. That's minimum 400 tons per day that they've been dumping contaminated wastewater into the ocean, Pacific Ocean. It also doesn't keep into account that they have ongoing spewing here. I've talked about this in past videos. I'm roughly about 70 million becquerels of radiation is spewing out every single hour. So we definitely have an ongoing crisis here, and nothing's being talked about, nothing at all on the west coast here, even in Canada, and that's what the point of this video. I got some more information on that, and my own personal connection to all of this. It's rather sad that I can't do anything to help us out. So as I mentioned here, I live on the Vancouver Island and British Columbia, Canada, and you know, we're aware here that the contamination of the seafood, it's going to happen. It's probably in the process of taking place as we speak, and has already started with the initial fallout, because I've talked about this in the past, how even the sea kelp had some initial fallout. So if the kelp was picking it up off the ocean from the initial blast, guaranteed some of the fish got a little bit of it. And I've talked about even the salmon have tested positive recently, the pink salmon, the chump salmon. In 2012, I talked about how the fish, the tuna, Pacific tuna, tested 10 times more radioactive after only spending 5 months in the Pacific Ocean after the meltdown. Now, recently here, we're having a British Columbia Grand Chiefs. They're concerned about it here. The Canadian government's not doing nothing. And I was talking about my own personal sad situation about this. Is that well, I have a family member, a very close one of mine, that works for the president of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and I've discussed this situation, and she says they're not going to do nothing until it becomes more of a concern, I guess. So I'm hoping you folks write a letter in, please. You can Google that, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, if you're Canadian, and send in an email and tell them you'd like our food to be tested, because in Canada, you know, there's no steps here whatsoever. They're warning that there's a threat. You know, even I have to admit, my contact, she says, we're not really concerned yet. Okay, I don't know why, because there's enough proof out there. Anyway, so what I'll do, folks, here, I'll leave links down below here if you want to send them an email. And it also says right here, if you're in the United States and you want to contact them, please, I ask you to take a proactive approach to this. Even though if you're not Canadian, no matter where you live in the world, why not send them an email, even if it's not the United States, and or you can call them. If you live in Canada, there's a free 1-800 number here. Don't call your local area regional offices, okay? Call the headquarters, the main place here on Maryville Road in Ottawa, okay? And call the 1-800 number. It's long distance. If you're in Ottawa, go and call the local number, okay? Share with everyone you love. Let's take a proactive approach to bringing our government responsible, so they can take their own measurements and let Canadians aware and make them aware of what's going on, and the testing, real testing's taking place, instead of, if you notice the past headlines that I showed here, how they're relying on other sources of information, not actually doing their own testing. That's it for my video. Hope you enjoyed the information. Take care.
You cannot filter it out. It is in you. You are listening. Like when the voice inside your head says something, you are listening. It's not even a choice, because it's inside, right? And it's kind of trippy.